Well, thank you everybody for coming. It is 1 o'clock, so I think we should begin. I thought I should introduce myself. My name is Scarlett Stromer. I'm a senior student here at HSU in the Wildlife Management and Conservation Program. And this summer, I went to Africa to study giraffe with the Giraffe Conservation Foundation. So I thought I would introduce the GCF and give you a little bit of information about them. So the GCF stands for Giraffe Conservation Foundation. The co-founders and the director are Julian Fennessy, shown here with some West African giraffe behind him, and this is Stephanie. Julian started his PhD in 1997. He wanted to study the relationship of elephant and giraffe in the arid environments of Namibian desert. And so once he was there, he started doing his research and realized that there's not a lot of information on giraffe, but there's a lot of information on elephant. And so he changed his focus a little bit and started just focusing on giraffe. In 1999, he met Stephanie, his wife now. She was working for the Desert Research Fund, and so was he while he was doing his PhD. So together, they both worked on giraffe research, and after his PhD, they got married in 2003, and after that, they had a few children, Luca and Molly. This is Becca and I. We were at a restaurant. I was fortunate enough to meet Stephanie before going into the field. And so they continued with their full-time jobs as a consultant, and they continued research on giraffe after his PhD. They would study giraffe on the weekends, on vacations, and it was their passion, so they continued it. They would write grants for more projects, and as their projects kept getting bigger and bigger, they decided, well, we kind of need an organization, so we're not asking people to just deposit money into our personal bank accounts. So that's when the GCF was born in 2009. The GCF is the only organization in the world that solely only works on conservation and management of giraffe in the wild. They're a leader in supporting a sustainable future for giraffe and their habitat. They work with local governments, NGOs, and other conservation partners in Africa in 15 different countries. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel, they're just trying to build relationships with conservation partners to better conserve the giraffe for future generations. So a few of the GCF's objectives are to raise awareness and promote the value of giraffe in Africa and also internationally. They identify key threats to giraffe's habitat and ways in mitigating threats to giraffe and their home. They collaborate with local governments, NGOs, and other partners, as I had mentioned before. They plan, develop, implement, and administer projects and programs throughout Africa. They also raise funds to go towards giraffe projects, and they stay in close connection with the IUCN on the giraffe and the Okapi specialist groups. So I wanted to share a little bit about genetics of giraffe. So when Julian started his PhD, there wasn't any information about genetics. Giraffe were thought to be as just one species, and so in the late 1990s, he got the correct permits to start taking genetic samples of giraffe. He was able to share this information with local zoos or zoos in the United States to compare genetics between captive giraffe and giraffe in the wild. After he collected so many samples, he sent them off to the GCF's partner, the Seckenberg Biosphere of Climate and Research Center. And what they found was groundbreaking. They found that the giraffe had split up 1.5 million years ago, and now there are 4 different species of giraffe. The 4 different species, the Maasai reticulated, the northern and the southern. The northern and the southern have subspecies after more research has been done. And so the northern giraffe has 3 subspecies, and the southern giraffe has 2 subspecies. These species of giraffe are so different from each other that the Germany partner said that they're more genetically different than a brown bear and a polar bear. And so in my next slide, you'll see that they do have a bit of different physical characteristics. So the IUCN only sees giraffe as one species still, which is kind of disappointing because different species of giraffe have different population numbers, and they all are doing differently with conservation-wise, and so some are in more dire straits than others. So with Julian being the co-chair on the IUCN Giraffe Specialist Group, I foresee this changing in the near future, and then each of them will have their own conservation status, which will bring more protection to those giraffe. So while I was in Africa, I was lucky enough to take part in the DNA sampling. So this is a dart. This is what the dart looks like. So we shoot the dart out of a dart rifle, and we target the thigh of the giraffe. And so when the dart hits the giraffe, there's a needle that comes out of the tip of the dart, and the needle has barbs on it. And so when it hits the giraffe and the giraffe starts walking, the needle will come back into the dart with a plug of skin. And this plug of skin is quite small. Becca and I went to go out into the field after Emma shot it and collect the dart, come back to the truck, get the piece of skin off of the dart, which can be kind of hard because of those barbs, and then put it in the test tube, and we write the individual's ID number on there, so we have to identify the individual before darting them. A lot of giraffe that we've ID'd already have DNA taken from them, so a lot of the individuals we darted were juveniles, which was kind of hard because they like to run around and chase each other, and so they don't like to hold still. So it was quite hard. So yes, it was very exciting. We got to dart 3 giraffe while I was there. So this is a diagram of the different giraffe that are in Africa. So we have the Maasai giraffe, 35,000 individuals. And so I want to mention that all of these statuses are what the Giraffe Conservation Foundation has said. These aren't what the IUCN says. IUCN says that all giraffe as one species is vulnerable, which isn't accurate. So the northern giraffe is not doing good. They're in they're critically endangered. The West African giraffe is the most endangered of them all, with only 600 individuals left in the wild. And so the West African giraffe live in Chad. In this teeny tiny little population, they are in a giraffe zone, is what it's called. The whole population is encompassed by people and communities, and so they're not able to migrate out of that area. And so if something were to happen in Chad and something were to happen to those giraffe, they would all be gone. That would be the last of the African giraffe. So it's a very serious situation for them. But in total, we have 111,000 giraffe left in the wild, which isn't much at all. Giraffe have been decreasing by 40% within the last 30 years. And if that continues, then we're not going to have giraffe left, which is very, very sad. So this is a fun little interactive poster that the GCF's made, so you can see the difference between each giraffe. And so we see that the Maasai giraffe has very jagged, dark spots, but the reticulated giraffe has very dark chestnut brown with a very thin line of creamy white outlining those spots. And so over time, these giraffe, because the genetics weren't flowing between populations, they change genetically, and they also can change physically, just depending on the type of environment they're in, the type of food they're eating. And so while I was in Namibia, I was studying the Angolan giraffe. They're quite pale, similar to the Kordofan giraffe. They're the palest two of of them all. While I was out in the field, it was quite interesting to see a giraffe and then identify it in its book and see that like 6 months ago, it was very, very pale. And today, as I'm looking at it, it's quite dark, and you can see all of its patches. And so we don't quite know why giraffe can become lighter and darker. It's definitely a question to look into. We don't know if it's maybe their environment, their maybe a dominance thing, or maybe what they're eating. So kind of cool. So some threats to giraffe. The biggest threat is habitat loss, fragmentation, and degradation. So like I mentioned with the West African giraffe earlier, they're in this giraffe zone that is encompassed with communities, and they're not able to leave that area due to the human encroachment. So basically, more people, less space for giraffe, which is unfortunate. The next biggest threat to giraffe is illegal hunting. In Namibia, that doesn't happen often. All of these areas are protected where the giraffe are at, but in Uganda, they put snares out and for target species, but then giraffe will unfortunately get caught up in a snare, and some of those giraffe just can't live past the damage that those snares do to their legs. And so the Giraffe Conservation Foundation has found many giraffe in the wild that have snares in their legs that's digging into the bone, and they have to euthanize them, and so it's really unfortunate. And then giraffe skin disease is it's quite an understudied disease, but we know that it exists. It can happen anywhere on the giraffe's body. The ones that we saw when I was there was happening on the legs. So this giraffe had it pretty bad. It was all the way almost past his, pretty far up his leg. And then this guy just had like a little patch. And we don't know if it's genetic or if it's contagious, if it can be spread to cattle. We don't quite know. The Cheyenne Mountain Zoo over in Colorado has been doing a lot of research because they have captive giraffe that have it, and so they've been doing skin samples and looking more into that and see if it's a genetic or a contagious disease. And so, and also another threat to giraffe is just lack of attention for a really, really long time. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard that elephants, I mean, they're doing terrible in the wild. We're losing a lot of elephants. We hear a lot of publicity about elephants, but we don't hear a lot about giraffe. And when you compare how many individuals are left in the wild, it's pretty astonishing. We have 111,000 giraffe in the wild, and we have 400,000 elephants. So I wanted to kind of showcase this last project that the GCF did. They did it in the late 2018, and they relocated 8 West African giraffe. Very exciting for the West African giraffe. So, like I had mentioned, they're in this condensed population actually in Niger. 10 years ago, the Niger government decided we want to do something for these giraffe. We want to protect our animals. And so they contacted the GCF. Julian was more than happy to work with them, but it takes quite a bit of time to think of a plan and to find partners and to find funding to do a big project like this. So it took 10 years, but they finally went and did it. So I'm gonna play a little clip and let Julian take the stage for a moment because he can just showcase it much better than I can.
I know, you're doing great.
Thank you.
And there's animal crackers for everybody if you're interested.
Yes, please enjoy the animal crackers. I don't, yeah, get up.
But you can do all of your own.
Ooh, yay. Okay, so the clip's just real quick. It's just a 4-minute clip, but it's very captivating, so I hope you enjoy.
Many people would not know it, but Niger is home to the last West African giraffe in the wild. There's none in any zoos around the world. They're right here.
Les girafes vivent avec la population. Le gouvernement du Niger a eu la présence d'esprit d'organiser la conservation, la protection. Et maintenant, elles se sont multipliées, ces girafes-là.
All the eggs are in one basket, so to speak. If we set up new populations, satellite populations, just in case there's something going wrong, we can then have these populations that are safe and secure.
The ropes are in the right place, we've got the trailer ready, the tow hitch works finally, and we're ready to go.
So each giraffe has been caught individually. We identify a giraffe which is suitable age, suitable sex. Dart it. It takes 2 or 3 minutes, the drug kicks in. Sometimes they'll go down quite quickly, sometimes they'll give us a bit of a run. At the right stage, we'll pull ahead of the giraffe and using the ropes, pull it down and quickly give the antidote. Now, there's quite a lot of things we do with the giraffe. Check their age, take some measurements, take some blood samples for disease work, etc., etc. We've got 8 animals here, 3 males and 5 females. They settle on remarkably well. I mean, particularly these giraffe, because they're so used to people. Everyone ready?
Pull! Pull!
Donc le fait de réintroduire cette espèce dans la réserve, c'est vraiment une fierté nationale, disons, parce que c'est pour la première fois qu'il y a eu la translocation d'une espèce d'une zone à une autre.
We've just taken giraffe for approximately 48 hours to Gudabadji Game Reserve. It's the first release ever of West African giraffe in the wild. This is the start of something big for this population. Thanks, guys.
So that is my dream. I want to do that. That is just everything that I feel like I'm on this earth for. So, does anybody have any questions about that video? I mean, with the giraffe dropping down to the ground, it may have seemed very invasive, and it is. So, did anybody have any concerns for the giraffe? I mean, so they rope them in order to kind of guide them into those trucks. They put the ropes on the front of the giraffe after they tranquilize the giraffe. So the veterinarian that you saw in that video will give basically a lethal dose of a tranquilizer to drop such a huge animal down to the ground. And then after they capture that animal, they have to immediately give a reversal drug, and so that lethal dose doesn't kill the giraffe. And so they do have to put the ropes around it to help the giraffe down so they can immediately give that reversal drug. And so that's why the ropes are there. And in the video, you may have seen that they were measuring a little spot on the giraffe. That was the giraffe skin disease that they were measuring. I had forgot to mention, but in my previous slide on the giraffe skin disease, and in the photo with the disease all the way up the leg. So Emma, the researcher that I was with for 2 weeks, she had mentioned that she saw this individual maybe 3 months prior to when we had seen him, and he was really dragging his foot and he couldn't really walk. And when we saw him, he was actually able to pick up his foot and walk. And so, kind of cool. I mean, not cool that he has a disease, but it's great that, it's getting better. So we don't really know if it will get better to the point where he'll be okay. They have found a giraffe prior to this that was dead, and they saw giraffe skin disease on his leg, and it had ate all the way into the bone. And so it can kill them. Yes, Bill?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Is it fatal or?
Yeah. So that was the only incident that I had heard of that they had seen a giraffe dead. And after they did the examination, they saw the disease, and they had ate into the bone, and so pretty terrible disease.
Is it bacteria?
We're not quite sure. GCF hasn't done a whole lot of skin samples from giraffes in the wild, but the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is doing a lot of skin scrapes on their individuals in captivity. Yeah.
How big a threat is natural type predators like lions? I mean, and I know it's interesting 1,000 on there. I'm sure illegal hunting meant men.
Yes, yeah. So that's like poaching. It takes quite a few lions to bring a giraffe down, so I don't think that's like a major concern for conservationists. But I mean, that's a natural thing that happens in the wild, so there's nothing that we can do to prevent that or stop lions from killing giraffe. But it does happen, and I have a photo of a giraffe later on in my presentation that was attacked by lions, but she survived. So I'll share that. So you may be wondering, how can I get involved? So Giraffe Conservation Foundation has this cool project or program called Adopt a Giraffe. Right now we have 6 giraffe up for adoption. These giraffe have names, they have ID numbers, and we usually see them a lot when we're going out and doing this data collection. And so you can go to their website and purchase a giraffe. The Adopt a Giraffe program comes with a certificate. And so you can say, I have this giraffe in Africa. And every 3 months there's a quarterly...
HSU Library Giraffe.
Yes, we could! We could have an HSU Library Giraffe. And so every 3 months, a quarterly report comes out about your giraffe. And you can learn new facts. Maybe your giraffe had a baby, or she's with a mate, or you get to kind of follow their life. It's fun. Or you can just make a simple donation or buy a GCF wear. So they have shirts and hoodies and mugs and different things that you can buy. Or you can volunteer in the field for 2 weeks and participate in data collection. And that is what I did. So I have loved giraffe for many, many, many years, probably since the time I started high school. And it just started as a favorite animal. I didn't know where I would go with that. I knew I wanted to do something with wildlife in the future. So time went on, I went to community college, and I learned about the GCF, actually a documentary on PBS. And I was like, wow, that's what I want to do. That's my dream job. And so basically that's why I'm here today, getting a degree in wildlife conservation, is because I want to save the giraffe. So I found out that they accept volunteers. I applied, and I luckily got accepted. And I flew 33 hours to Namibia, very long flight, that includes layovers and all that. And 4 days being there, I started data collecting and seeing giraffe. So now I begin my trip with the GCF. So this is my first day in Namibia. We stayed at a place called Rivendell. I'll mention, there's another volunteer that went with me. Her name is Becca, and she is a giraffe zookeeper over in Boston. And the researcher that we went out into the field with was also a zookeeper. Her name is Emma, and she worked in New Zealand at the Auckland Zoo, which is one of the major sponsors for the GCF. A lot of zoos will send money to the GCF for conservation in the wild. And so Emma had worked with birds and reptiles, and she said, I want to do something different. So she volunteered with the GCF, absolutely fell in love with it, contacted them and said, I want more. What can I do to get involved? And they hired her on, and she quit her job in New Zealand. She sold her house, rehomed her pets, and moved to Africa. And this is what she's been doing for the last 2 years, is data collecting on giraffe. And so this is me in the new office in Namibia. We got to Namibia, went to Rivendell, relaxed, but the next day we went out into the town, explored a bit, did some grocery shopping for our food for the next 2 weeks, and we went to the office. And so I got to meet Stephanie for the very first time. I got to meet Maria, the finance manager, and then we started packing up our truck, our trusty Steed, for the next 2 weeks. And then, I was just captivated by all the birds. This is a white-backed mouse bird and a red-eyed bulbul. I was definitely that person that was taking photos of everything because it's an African rock and it's an African plant. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in Africa. I was even taking pictures of the warthog sign. So I was just loving every moment of it. So after we went grocery shopping, it's the third day in Africa, and we're going out to our study site. So we stayed here. I flew into Windhoek, Namibia, which is the capital, and we drove all the way up here. We went through Ocho, we stopped at a nice bakery, and then we headed over to the study site. Our first night was not in the study site quite yet. We had drove 9 hours, so we needed to sleep for the night and then head into the study site the next day. And so this is the study site where all the giraffe live. Giraffe are not really found down here. There's a few game reserves where they have giraffe, but these are the ones that are in the wild, and no fences, and they move however they like. And so our study site consisted of 3 ephemeral rivers. An ephemeral river means that it doesn't have water all year round. It only has water when it rains. And Namibia is in an extremely dry desert. And so these rivers will only have water that flow for maybe max a month per year. This river, very small river, but we didn't know it at the time, but that would be the only time we would see water in a river. This was actually the Horsib River, which was part of our study site. It was the second river we had went to. And so we stayed at a place called Aganga campsite. It was very nice. Because there's water, there was a lot of animals around, mostly cattle and donkeys. And so they were in our campsite eating, munching away. And so that was neat. And so going to the campsite, we didn't see any giraffe that day, but we did see springbok, and we saw lots and lots of hornbill. Hornbill are basically our quail here, or like a dove. They're very, very common. They're everywhere. And they have 3 different species, so throughout my presentation, I'll have lots of pictures of hornbill. Okay, we have made it to the study site. I forgot to mention, so we drove all the way almost to the Angolan border. So the first river is up here, it's called the Hawana River, and then we just made our way down south. So here we are in the Hawana River. We were driving all day. We saw ostrich, we saw rosy-faced lovebirds, which was very exciting. I don't know if any of you have had pet birds, but this is a common pet. So I was like, whoa, I'm seeing pet store birds in the wild. And so it was nearing the end of the day. We're almost to our campsite, and we're going over these little hills, and over to our left, we see giraffe for the very first time. It was a very, very special moment. We immediately started data collection. There was really no time for enjoying the moment. Later on in our trip, Emma had asked us, so do you want to name a giraffe? Because a lot of these giraffe had names. And Becca and I were, of course we want to name a giraffe. And so this guy right here, he was the first giraffe I saw, so I named him Elliot. I've just always loved that name, so that's my giraffe in Africa. And then Becca named her giraffe Chadwick in honor of her male giraffe over at the Boston Zoo. And so yeah, that was very exciting. So we stayed at Marble Mountain Campsite for 2 nights, and we would get up at 6 a.m. and leave camp by 8 a.m. every morning. And we would stay in the truck the whole time, and we would drive all day looking for giraffe. And when we found giraffe, we would start taking photos of them and start the data collection process. And so Emma had mentioned that the Juana River doesn't have many giraffe, but there is one herd in particular that has about 14 to 20 individuals. And she said that's going to be the moment where it's going to be a test, because it's quite hard to take a photo of a giraffe and then take a photo of this giraffe over here and then remember which giraffe you took a picture of over here. So it was quite hard, but Emma was good at it. She had the eye and she could remember which individual was which. But she's been doing this for 2 years, so she trained her eye to be able to do that. So we kept driving. We weren't finding this big herd. And it was the last day in the river, and we were driving to the next campsite, and she said, I just want to go a little bit more. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine with me. So we go for about 30 more minutes down the riverbed, and we see this guy. And he's poking his head out. And I was like, ooh, giraffe! And so we get closer and closer, and then all these giraffes start flooding out of this big, huge bush. And it was like, whoa. So we start data collecting, which I'm going to go over in the next slide. And so earlier that day, I had asked Emma, are we allowed to take pictures with the giraffe? And she said, well, yeah, but mostly the minute you get out of the truck, they run away. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I didn't really know if I was going to get a picture with a giraffe or not. And so after we had finished our data collection process, she said, Scarlett, you can get out of the car and take a picture with the giraffe. And I'm like, oh, I would love that. And so that's when this photo happened. And I think that's really when it truly set in, that I was in Africa and I was with the giraffe. And that was the moment that was, waterfall, and Emma's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm just so happy to be here. So once we got to our campsite, we got to see Rupel parrots, which was very special. Emma had never seen them in the wild, being there for 2 years, so that was a special encounter. They were drinking some drips from the faucet. And then we saw lots of oryx. And so oryx are a special ungulate. They have this special thermoregulation nasal system in their nose where their blood flows through their body, and then before it hits their brain, it goes through their nasal cavity and it cools down with the air that they're breathing in through their nose. So you'll see oryx in the middle of the day hanging out when you won't see any other ungulates around. So kind of neat. So the data collection process. So every time we came across a giraffe, we'd get the camera out and the data sheet. Whoever's sitting in the front seat would be the data collector, and the person in the back seat would be the photo taker. So the data sheet includes the date, the specific animal. GCF works with other conservation groups for elephants and rhinos, and so we can do this for rhinos or elephants. And so we wrote G for giraffe. Then we take the GPS coordinates, how many individuals are in the herd, and then we sex them, age them, and then for each individual, we will take a right and left photo. These are pretty much ideal photos that we want of the giraffe, and then we will write the number in the camera, that photo's number, on the data sheet to correlate with that individual. And then later on in the evening, we'll upload those photos to the computer and ID the giraffe using ID books. So how do you sex and age a giraffe? Well, we weren't sexing giraffe the traditional way. We were using their ossicones. And so males will neck and fight with each other. Maybe some of you have seen videos of that. And so their ossicones will wear off, their little fuzzy hairs on top will wear off. And so you can see that this male here, his name was King. They were bald. And so you can see that from quite a distance, these bald ossicones compared to the little fuzzies that the females have. And then this is a good photo to compare sizes of giraffe. And so we have an adult female here adults are categorized of 5 years or older. Subadults are 2 years to 5 years, and a juvenile is newborn to 2 years. And so when we found this group of giraffe, we presumed that this was a female, and so we presumed that this was her oldest son, and then her newest baby. And so it was quite interesting to see that the subadult was still with mom. We don't quite know how long a juvenile or a baby will stay with mom, and so that's one of the questions that we were studying and doing this data collection for. And I forgot to mention, the main research question is herd sociality. So we don't know why these giraffe are in these herds. Well, we don't know if they're families, or if they're friends, or if they're just intermingling between herds. So that's why we identify each individual and take photos of them, and we write that herd number down with who's in that herd, because next week it might change. We might have a different individual in that herd, and that's why we also take DNA samples, because who is that individual? Is that an individual that's related to this group, or is it just a friend, or is it a mate? And so lots of questions, and so this data collection can answer many of those questions.
So Scarlett, you're saying
Yes.
they don't have Facebook?
No. But the GCF does. Yes. So IDing the giraffe. This is a photo of Elliot, actually. So this is what the ID books look like. The ID books are categorized by river, and so we have the Kumid, the Horsib, and the Hawanab River. And then after they're categorized by river, then we have the male book for that river, and then we have the female and the juvenile book. And so we will upload photos on the computer. We find a chunk of spots that are distinguishable to us, and then we go to that river's book that we found that giraffe in and flip through the photos and try to match the spots with photos in the book. So it's kind of like a little bit of a puzzle. I really liked it. It was like, I couldn't wait for the evening. I was like, I can't wait to identify giraffe. So each individual has an ID number. They have an acronym for the river, and so the Kumid was KHB, and then they have a F for female, M for male, or U for unknown sex, because we can't sex juveniles. And then they have their number that they were, like, however many giraffe we've seen in that area. So this guy was like the 31st individual we saw in the area. And so overall, for our whole trip, we saw 165 individuals. And we were only there for about 12 days. So we had very, very, very busy days finding giraffe. We had an average of 42 herds, 65 males and 100 females, and 4 new individuals. 3 of those were males, and then we had 1 new baby. It's very exciting. Namibia is doing quite well with their giraffe populations. The numbers are increasing compared to some other countries where numbers are decreasing. So Namibia has done quite a good job with protecting their giraffe. A lot of these areas that we were in all had conservancies on the land. And so the local people that live in these areas they know about these conservancies, and so they know that they can't hunt these giraffe or they'll get fined or in trouble. But they do get rewarded by being able to apply for a permit to hunt or to hunt and kill an animal. And so last December, Julian and Stephanie were on vacation, and they were tracking the giraffe, because some of the giraffe have GPS units on their ossicones, and they had said yes to one of the applications to kill a giraffe for Christmas. And so a local tribe went out and shot a giraffe, and then the GCF or Julian and Stephanie were watching the giraffe moving into a town called Sesfontaine, and then going into a house. And it's not normal behavior for a giraffe. And so they went to that house. They had suspected, yes, they killed this giraffe. But it's unfortunate because that giraffe had a GPS unit on it. And so now all that data that was collected for 2 years while that GPS unit was on it is kind of garbage now. I mean, we can use that 2 years of data, but it took a lot of time and a lot of energy to get a giraffe down to the ground like you saw in that video earlier. And so it's quite disappointing that those locals had killed a giraffe with the GPS unit. So Julian and Stephanie went to that house, collected the GPS unit, and told them, you need to be a little more vigilant when hunting, because it takes a lot of time and effort and money to put those GPS units on those giraffes, and now we've lost that individual. It's disappointing, but anyways, moving on. So these are the Aussie cone units. These Aussie units are the most innovative GPS collars basically in the world. They're very expensive, but we don't want to do that. So these units cost about $1,500 per unit, but they are solar powered, so you don't have to recapture that individual and change the battery, so they're very efficient. And they take points about every 4 hours. So you can, or not 4 hours, 4 times a day, sorry. And so you can see where they're moving, and these units can give us information on movements and habitat use, and so we can know where they are and where they aren't, and so we can protect them better. This is a recent map that just came out from the GCF. This is in Chad. These are 8 Kordofan giraffe that have GPS units on them. And this national park, when GCF had originally wanted to put GPS units on these giraffe, the rangers told GCF, oh, no, they never go to this side of the park. They never do that. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we're going to put the units on and see where they go. And as you can see, there's a giraffe that went over here, a lonesome giraffe, but he used that area. And so that's good information for the GCF, so we can now protect that area. And so in Chad, there's a lot of rainfall, and so this was a study seeing how giraffe use the landscape in relations to the flooding that happens in the national park, and so quite interesting that this guy went over there. Something that rangers on the ground can't tell us, but these units can, so it's cool. So continuing with the data collection, we ended up in the Horseshoe River. This was probably my favorite river because there was a lot of giraffe. One day we saw 31 giraffe and 23 elephant just in one day, so very, very busy day. We saw Steinbok, they're very skittish ungulates. They're one of the smallest ungulates there, and so these guys weren't quite skittish, and they let me get their photo of them. And then just a cute giraffe playing peekaboo. They hide in these bushes, and so that's why we were sexing them off of their ossicones. And so when they're hiding in these bushes, we have to get the truck and kind of like get a little close to them and kind of push them out of the bush because we want that photo of them. But some individuals are just stubborn and they don't want to get out of the bush, and so then we just have to say, well, we have one individual in this herd that was unidentifiable, and so yeah, that's how that works. And here is a auger buzzard and a very common raptor in Africa that we kept seeing. This was our first bull elephant. Each night we would go to a sundown spot and enjoy the sunset, drink a cider, and enjoy the scenery. And so this was our first bull that we saw walking down the river. So bull elephants are, they're interesting. Well, all elephants are interesting. They will come to a camel thorn acacia tree and take their trunk and go around the tree and shake the tree. And Emma had kept telling us about this phenomenon, and I wanted to see it so bad, and we were lucky enough to actually see it. But they shake the pods, these seed pods, off the tree, and then they eat them off the ground. But the giraffe like to eat them too, and so we caught a giraffe eating some seed pods off the ground, and so that was pretty cool. This giraffe was pretty comfortable with his surroundings. He felt pretty comfortable to put his head down on the ground, and that's how they drink water too. There was other giraffe in the area kind of watching out. So not all the giraffe go down at the same time. There's always a few watching out for the guy who has his head down. And another special moment where Emma let me get out of the truck and take some pictures with the giraffe. You can't really see them, but there are some over there. They're just hiding, they're camouflaging in there. So, going from the Horosib River to the Howanab River, we went through this migration corridor called the Akongwe. Emma kept telling us, you know, the Akongwe doesn't have many giraffe. If there are any giraffe, they're going to be migrating from the Horosib River to the Howanab, or so forth, vice versa. And she said, but there are rhino, so keep your eyes peeled for rhino. So we're driving along, and Becca spots a rhino out in the field. And so we stop and we enjoy the moment and take pictures. This was a black rhino, which was very special because black rhino are critically endangered. So there's not many of them. And later that evening, we had went to a water hole. It was a man-made water hole. The president in Namibia cares about the animals, which is great. And he had chosen a few locations throughout Namibia to make man-made water holes. And so the rhino have water and elephants have water. And so we went there for our sundown that night, and some rhino trackers came, and Emma had said, oh, we found a rhino over in this area. And they were like, oh yeah, that's Tinky. And so this is Tinky. Kind of a funny name for such a big rhino, but so it was nice to have a name to put to the face. So that evening, we had previously been spending time in campsites that had showers and toilets, and very, very nice. I wasn't expecting to have a shower for 2 weeks, so when she said that, I was like, woohoo! But when we were in the Akongwe, we just found a spot in the desert and set up camp. So this was our campsite for 2 nights, and in the evening, we were sleeping and getting ready for bed, and the mountain zebra. So mountain zebra were everywhere in the Akongwe. And you could hear them galloping on this mountain ridge and then squealing really, really, really loud. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Are they mad? Like, are they talking to each other? Is this normal? That night was June 17th, and it was the full moon. And so I think that they were just out and about because they could see really well. I had asked Emma the next morning and said, did you hear the zebra last night? And she was like, no. And I was like, they were being really loud. How could you not hear? But I guess she put earplugs in at night, and so she didn't hear them. But Becca did, and Emma had told us, she was like, well, they were probably mad we were in their area, and they were telling us to leave. And so that's why they were squealing. And then we came across a dead giraffe. This giraffe has been dead over a year. And so it's kind of just showing that it's so dry in the desert that even bodies can't decompose. And so, I mean, he even smelt it. Like something that dies over a year ago here would be very decomposed at this point, but he wasn't. And so when they first found him, they weren't quite sure why he died. And so they looked around the body and they couldn't see any signs of predation. And so they just assumed he died of old age. And they took a DNA sample, they sent it off to Germany, and they had actually never identified this individual. So he was new to the area. And so maybe he was a secretive giraffe and then came over to a tree and passed away. But there were lions there when they found him, and so the lions were feeding on his body. And then we made it to the Howanab River. The Howanab River had lots and lots and lots of giraffe and elephant. So here's Coffee Bean. This was a very photogenic male. He was quite used to vehicles, and so we kind of got pretty close to him, which was special. There's 2 lodges on each side of the Howanab River, and one of the lodges is called the Natural Selection Lodge. And this is a painting that the San tribe had done and gifted to the lodge. And so this was the little driveway up to the lodge. It was like tucked away in the mountains. But this lodge is a partner with GCF. So many of the guides that go out with their guests will take photos of the giraffe and ID them and catalog it just like we do. And then if the guests are interested, then they can ID the giraffe at nighttime. And so that's very helpful to us, so we don't have to always go to the Hawanabe River. The Hawanabe River is about 800 kilometers away from Windhoek, Namibia, and so it takes a very, very, very long time. The conversion is like 1 mile to 0.6 of a mile for 1 kilometer, and so quite a ways away. And so it's nice that those guides do that for us and then send us the photos, and so we can update the ID books. And so we spent some time at the lodge on World Giraffe Day, which was June 21st. It's the longest day of the year for the tallest animal. Quite appropriate. Emma gave a speech to the guests there, and we had dinner. And the Damara tribe is just right outside of the Hawanabe River in Sesfontein, and so many of the employees there were Damara, and they're very musical. And there was one lady, and she was even dancing when we pulled up, and she was just so happy we were there. And so that evening, one of the guests it was his birthday, and so the Damara people came in and had the drum, and they were singing happy birthday in their own language. And their language is the click language, and so every other word has this click. So it's very cool to listen to them speak. And Emma and Becca, Emma had told us that they're very musical, and they might pull you up and dance with you. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm so into that. I hope that you pull me up and dance with me, or I get to dance with them. And so that night, we didn't expect it at all, but they were singing happy birthday to him, and it was like a show. And I'm grooving in my seat, and one of the women pulled me up, and so I got to dance with the tribe that night, and it was like a dream come true. I was so happy, and they were playing the drum. It was just wonderful. And there was champagne. It was great. Okay, so this is a white-backed vulture, which is a critically endangered vulture in Namibia. So quite special to see this guy. He was just hanging out in a tree. We saw lots of signs of vultures, but we didn't quite see a whole lot of vultures. And so, we would see their nests in the trees, and their nests are just giant. It's is that a dinosaur nest or something? Quite cool to see him. And so we spent some time taking photos of him. And then these are just more springbok. They're very, very common, again, with the oryx. And then I just went at the perfect time. Everybody seemed to have babies. And so lots and lots of baby zebra and elephant and giraffe. So that was special. So this is for my botany people in the audience. I saw just a few plants, not too many. It is the desert, and so it's very dry. But we saw Euphorbia virosa and Euphorbia damarana. These are toxic plants to humans. But rhino can eat them, and so that's cool. And then Welwitschia, very cool. Some of you may know it's the oldest conifer in the world, and they start out with 2 leaves, and then those leaves will split and split and split. And so Emma said that this Welwitschia was probably close to 1,000 years old, which was just crazy to me. It was a huge one. It was huge. Yellow codon, very, very common geranium species in Africa. And then this is the camel thorn acacia tree, giraffe's favorite food. And then we saw ostrich salad, which is part of the succulent family. And so when you pop those little succulent pods, water squirts out. And so a lot of small rodents and ostrich eat it to get water. So some special encounters that I had. So this is Cliff. He was in the Hawanabe River, and he has a cleft palate. He seems to be getting along, surviving pretty well, but you can see his cleft palate on his forehead here. We don't know quite why he has a cleft palate. We don't know if the genetics are not able to... the Hawanabe River is connected to the Horosib through the Okongwe, and so giraffe are able to migrate between the 2 rivers, but are they? We saw some, but... so we don't know if it's a closed population. So what I'm saying is basically he may have had some inbreeding or something happened where, because this isn't normal. So that was neat to see him. And then this is Coffee Girl. She was attacked by a lion. When GCF found her, her tail was just hanging on by a little piece of skin. So they tranquilized her, brought her down, amputated her tail, cleaned her up a bit. You can see scratches on her side or scars from the lions clawing her. And she's been surviving and doing pretty good. Giraffe only use their tails to swat flies, and so she's not able to do that, but she's doing good. And then I saw lions. It was very special. It was our last night in the Homonam River, and the guides at the Natural Selection Lodge told us that these lions were down in the river, and they had just killed a zebra, and so they weren't going to be leaving anytime soon. So we went down there in the evening for our sundown, and we saw the mama, but we didn't know where the cubs were. We knew there were cubs, but we couldn't find them, and so we went back early the next morning, right as the sun rose, and we found these guys. And they were so cute. We just saw one at first, and then his buddy came out of the woodworks and started playing with them, and they were rolling on the ground and tumbling around, and then they settled down for some photo taking. And you can see that they have a lot of blood on their necks from feeding on the zebra that evening. And so they were messy eaters. So that's my presentation. I want to thank you all for coming. I'm just very lucky to have you all interested in my summer adventure, and the giraffe are lucky too, because I was able to teach you a little bit about them. So I hope you enjoyed and maybe learned something new about giraffe. Okay, question time. Jim?
I have a question about how you counted the herds.
So,
165 and 42 herds.
Yes.
What am I missing here?
So, when we would come up to a herd of giraffe, a herd is defined by giraffe all moving in the same direction. And so, they all have to be moving in the same direction. So we would count how many individuals are in a herd. And then after we were done taking photos of them and doing the data collection, we would go down the river. And if we saw a giraffe maybe 2 miles down the river, that would be its own new herd because he's too far away from this herd. And even if he's moving in the same direction, he's still in a different herd because he's so far away. And so yeah. So we saw 42, and in total there was 165 individuals out of all the herds that we saw those days. Yeah.
How long do they live?
Giraffe can live into their 20s. They can live longer in captivity. So, yeah. Yes.
On the map, you had some areas where the different subspecies were.
Yeah.
One of them was a really small area.
Mm-hmm.
And was it like 5,000 or 6,000, 9,000?
So, which spot are you talking about?
Oh.
This one?
Okay, yeah.
So all the green are northern giraffe.
Okay.
The
so
yellow.
Is that enough of a breeding population for them to even be healthy?
Six for the West African giraffe. I mean, it's a big enough of a population for them to breed, but it's definitely a closed population, so there isn't enough genetic flow, and so things like cleft palates can happen, and different things, and so so it's not ideal to have them in such a closed population, and so that's why the GCF relocated 8 of them, and so that's a new population, and then they can breed, and so yeah. Did I answer that?
On this map, where were you?
I was down here.
Okay.
And so this is where the Angolian species are. Our study area was in the northwest, right up in this area. Yeah. Yeah.
So I know the different species is like a new discovery kind of thing.
Yes.
And do you know if they've done any sampling of captive individuals, like to tell which species they have in captivity?
Yes, they have. And so a lot of captive giraffe are actually hybridized because they didn't know that there was different species. Mm-hmm. And so many zoos don't have purebred giraffe, just because they've been hybridized over so many years of being here in the United States. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned the zebra squealing, right?
Yes.
And I don't know what the sort of wildlife scientific term is.
And neither do I, but it sounded like they were squealing.
Do giraffe vocalize?
They do not. Their communication is such at a high frequency that humans cannot hear it. Yeah, so so we didn't hear a giraffe making any noise. Yes, Rel.
What's your next adventure?
I want to go relocate or do a GPS deployment. When I had dinner with Stephanie, Julian was in Zimbabwe doing a GPS deployment. And I was like, wow, that's cool. So he couldn't make it to dinner. But then in July, they did another GPS deployment. So they have this big project going on called the Twiga Tracker. They're wanting to put out 2,000 GPS units on giraffe throughout Africa so they can track their movements and their habitat use. And so that was part of the Twiga Tracker, was the deployment of GPS units in Namibia. And another cool thing is that the population I studied was the population that Julian studied during his PhD. And so a lot of the adult giraffe I got to see were giraffe he saw when they were babies. And so it's quite cool to see, giraffe surviving and doing well. Yeah. Yeah, Lucy.
So the skin disease, is that only in wild populations? Because I know you said that they're studying it in Colorado, but are they studying the slides from the wild populations, or do their captive bred giraffe have skin disease?
So their captive giraffe have the skin disease.
And is that a worldwide phenomenon, or is it just Colorado and Africa?
No, so other zoos do have it, but it takes quite a bit of training to get a giraffe to allow you to take a skin scrape. And so Colorado's been working really hands-on with their giraffe to be able to bring into a stall and allow them to take blood work, because to do a study on giraffe skin disease, you have to take blood as well, and giraffe aren't really fond of you taking blood from them. So that's why the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is the one that's really pushing it forward, because their giraffe allow them to take the blood.
And do you know, I know that there's not that much research about giraffe, but is this a new disease, or is this been? So actually, I wanted to mention, we just purchased this book, the library, and in this was wrote by Ann Dagg. She was a giraffe researcher in the 1950s, and she wrote about the giraffe skin disease. So it's been around for quite a long time. Yeah, she also talks about a giraffe ear disease. I brought that up to Emma, and she had never heard about it. So I don't know if that's just been discredited or it's just not seen anymore. But yeah, this book's very accurate. I've read a lot of it. Very interesting. So if I've caught your interest with giraffe and you have more questions, this book's able to be checked out. Yeah, Kiwi.
I have a question for the room. Has anyone been to the continent of Africa?
Woohoo!
All right.
2 people. Right on.
Congratulations.
You can be next.
Yeah, you can.
Reading was too hot for me.
Yeah, this was their winter time, and so it was about 80 to 90 degrees during the day, which I'm like, this is summertime to me. I don't know which. All the locals were like in jackets and bundled up, and I'm like, it's so hot outside. I'm in shorts. But in the evening, it was freezing, so it got down to like 30 degrees at night. Yeah, it was cold in the evening, so I guess that's when the winter comes out. Yeah. Do we have any more questions?
And there's plenty of animal cookies.
Yes, please. Yes, thank you so much, Sorrel, for bringing those. It was very nice. So I'll just thank you all again for coming. I'm very lucky to have such a big support system and interest in my trip. So thank you all again.